K2, one of the most formidable peaks on Earth, faces ongoing difficulties. The year 2022 was a landmark period for this perilous mountain, making history in the climbing world. Now, as 2023 unfolds, it appears poised to continue that momentum, with climbers pushing their limits on the mountain's treacherous slopes. With this climbing season already underway, news of successful summits is expected to surface. Yet, while we celebrate these feats, the dangers that accompany each ascent remain ever present. We can only hope for the safe return of all those who dare to climb. Known as the Savage Mountain, K2 has a reputation as the ultimate test for even the most skilled climbers. Its nickname stems from its unpredictable weather patterns and the immense technical skill required to navigate its challenges. Among those who attempted to conquer K2 was Australian climber Matthew Eakin. A respected figure in the mountaineering community, Matthew possessed the expertise and determination to take on such a colossal challenge. However, his encounter with K2 would ultimately end in tragedy, marking the conclusion of a remarkable life and career. Although K2 is often compared to Everest, the two mountains share only some similarities. Both have witnessed record-breaking numbers of climbers in recent years, leading to environmental concerns like abandoned gear and waste left behind on the slopes. K2's Camp 2 is a prime example of this issue, earning the nickname Tent Graveyard for its accumulation of discarded equipment. However, K2 faces these challenges on a smaller scale than Everest, primarily due to its remote location. Unlike Everest, which benefits from the support of nearby villages and communities, K2's base camp is completely isolated, situated in a desolate wilderness. Reaching it involves a grueling 7 to 8 day trek through the rugged Karakoram mountains. Climbers must carry all their supplies, as there are no settlements to replenish provisions. The lack of luxury accommodations or prepared meals at base camp makes the experience even more daunting. Climbers must rely entirely on what they bring with them, often limited to basic survival gear. Despite its dangers, K2 has seen a rise in interest from climbers of varying skill levels. This trend has alarmed many experienced mountaineers who caution against the risks posed by unprepared climbers attempting such a dangerous peak. Alan Arnett, a renowned mountaineering blogger, recently highlighted incidents where Sherpas had to provide extensive assistance to inexperienced climbers. In some cases, Sherpas were tasked with basic duties such as securing crampons, guiding ropes, and even telling climbers when to walk or rest. This level of micromanagement is concerning, particularly on a mountain as hazardous as K2. To address some of these issues, Pakistan raised the cost of climbing permits in 2022 for the first time in 2 decades. However, this increase was effectively a return to rates last seen in 2001, with a 7-member team now required to pay $12,000 for a permit. While seasoned climbers may find this cost manageable, less experienced individuals often need additional guides and support, driving the total cost well above $100,000. This significant expense reflects the extreme difficulty of climbing K2 and underscores the seriousness of the endeavor. The dangers of K2 are starkly evident in its mortality rate. According to NASA, the mountain has a death rate of 25%, meaning 1 climber dies for every 4 who successfully reach the summit. By contrast, Everest has a death rate of just 1%. For Matthew Eakin, these risks were not theoretical. They were a reality he faced head-on. A 41-year-old tax lawyer from Australia, Matthew was also a co-founder of Mountaineers Down Under, a community dedicated to connecting climbers, sharing expertise, and discussing equipment and routes. Although little is known about his early life, by the time Matthew was 41, he had accumulated over 8 years of experience climbing high-altitude peaks in Nepal and the Karakoram range. His accomplishments included summiting 2 8,000-meter peaks, Manaslu in 2017 and Broad Peak in 2019. While his summit of Manaslu was later determined not to be the mountain's true summit, the feat was nonetheless impressive. When asked about the challenges of climbing 8,000-meter peaks, Matthew described the experience as an intense combination of physical and mental suffering. "It's not about fear, it's about the sheer effort involved," he once said. The physical toll, the mental toll, and the energy required to take even one step are immense. It's an incredible feeling to be 8,000 meters above everything, looking down at the world below. You feel so high that you can almost see the curvature of the earth. It's truly special. In 2022, Matthew set his sights on K2, determined to take on its formidable challenges. He joined a 6-person team organized by Adventure Pakistan Treks and Expedition Logistics. The climbers arrived in Pakistan in early June, marking the start of the climbing season on K2. Upon arriving at base camp, Matthew and his team spent several days acclimatizing before embarking on their climb. The team planned to ascend via the Abruzzi Spur, the most popular route to K2's summit. This path is favored by 75% of climbers, but comes with its own set of challenges. Narrow summit windows often lead to overcrowding, as lines of climbers form along the route. While Sherpas often bear the majority of the workload, setting fixed ropes and guiding climbers, K2's notoriously unpredictable weather frequently prevents the establishment of these ropes until summit day. As a result, reaching the upper camps for proper acclimatization becomes virtually impossible until those lines are in place, delaying the crucial process of adapting to the altitude. When the skies finally cleared on July 21st, the team resolved to make their climb up the savage mountain. The group ascended relentlessly for 16 hours, moving from base camp to Japanese Camp 3. By the time they reached Camp 4, exhaustion had begun to take its toll. On July 22nd, Richard, unable to continue due to fatigue, began his descent. Justin, needing additional rest, decided to follow a few hours later after regaining his strength at Camp 4. Feeling strong and determined, Matthew pressed onward, continuing his ascent. July 22nd proved to be a historic day for K2. Climbers formed long lines stretching from Camp 4 all the way to the summit. By the end of the day, an unprecedented 100 summits had been recorded, the most ever achieved in a single day in the mountain's history. Amid this chaotic surge of climbers, Matthew decided to hold off his summit attempt, avoiding the crowds and choosing to ascend the following day. His patience and planning led him to the pinnacle of the Savage Mountain on July 23rd, where he stood alone after enduring one of the toughest climbs of his life. For climbers, the descent is often more dangerous than the ascent, and this was tragically true for Matthew. After reaching the summit, he relayed the news to base camp and contacted his family, sharing his success and the fact that he was beginning his descent. However, tragedy struck lower on the mountain that same day. Richard, descending solo, slipped somewhere below Camp 1. With no witnesses to the accident, the alarm wasn't raised until Justin arrived at base camp hours later and realized that Richard had not returned. Sadly, Richard never made it back to base camp. Meanwhile, Matthew was making his way down through the perilous death zone and the infamous Bottleneck, eventually arriving at Japanese Camp 3 at 7,000 meters. Here he reached out to base camp for the final time, reporting his progress and condition. Tragically, shortly after this communication, Matthew disappeared. Despite repeated attempts to contact him, he was never heard from again. The uncertainty surrounding Matthew's fate left those at base camp in a state of growing anxiety. Days passed with no word or sign of the missing climber. 2 days after his disappearance, climbers traveling just above base camp made a grim discovery: the frozen bodies of both Matthew and Richard. The evidence confirmed that both men had fallen during their respective descents. While the bodies were intact and showed no signs of trauma, their frozen state underscored the harsh conditions of the mountain. The climbers who discovered Matthew's body were unable to move him due to the challenging conditions. They marked his location and descended to advance base camp to report their findings and seek assistance. An avalanche struck the area where Matthew's body lay, burying him beneath layers of snow and ice. Despite the best efforts of search and recovery teams, the avalanche made it impossible to retrieve Matthew's remains. Matthew's family, driven by a desire to honor his memory, pleaded for a recovery mission. In February 2023, a dedicated group of 9 climbers set out to recover Matthew's body. With funds raised by the family, amounting to over 76,000 Australian dollars, the team embarked on this challenging expedition. Details of the mission have remained private, and it is unclear whether they were ultimately successful. However, given the harsh conditions of K2, the recovery effort would undoubtedly have been an immense challenge. The tragic stories of Matthew Eakin and Richard Cartier highlight the unique and often underestimated dangers of mountains like K2. For Matthew Eakin, the Savage Mountain represented the ultimate challenge, a challenge that he faced with courage, determination, and skill. While his journey ended in loss, his legacy endures as a testament to the human spirit and the pursuit of the extraordinary.